Hello, my name is Sue and I will be presenting the webinar. The objective of this webinar is to show how to create customizable transition models based on Key Stage 2 prior attainment data and Key Stage 4 outcomes using the Transition Matrices tool. It is aimed at new and experienced 4Matrix users alike, and we hope that you will find it useful. First, we will quickly go over some housekeeping. For Key Stage 4, you can now sign up to share and compare our annual data collaboration. You can do this in 4Matrix by going to the Admin tab and selecting Share and Compare, and then choose the Register option. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/4Matrix data. We have over 850 members, and it's a great place to network and keep up to date with the latest news. And finally, if you don't receive newsletters and emails from us and you would like to, please email info@4matrix.com from your school email address and include your school name and job role. The audio for this webinar will only be from myself. Okay, so let's begin. Transition matrices, or TMs for short, can be used to measure a student's achievement in a chosen subject based on prior attainment and compared to your school's expected outcomes. Prior attainment is made up of a pupil's end of Key Stage 2 results, and the outcome grade can be from any subject or qualification a pupil studies at Key Stage 4, from any data set, for example, working at grades, mock results, target grades, and so on. Unlike the DFE transition matrices, where prior attainment and outcomes were predefined, 4Matrix TMs offer a tool for schools to set their own attainment boundaries and outcomes that are best for their school. The benefit of TMs is that they are completely customizable and can be personalized to suit expectations in your school. The settings saved for this purpose are referred to as transition models, and a school can have as many transition models as for as many subjects as required. For those of you who are unfamiliar with transition matrices, we will quickly summarize the functionality. The example on the screen now demonstrates the layout. They are a visual tool and easy to interpret. The y-axis plots the prior attainment into rows, which in this case is using P8 start points, with the x-axis plotting the outcome, in this case, grades 9 to 1. Pupils are plotted in the cells according to their corresponding data. In this case, our transition model plots a pupil with prior attainment P8 start point scores values of 3.6 to 4.3 in the third row. Pupils are then plotted in columns according to their outcome grade in the chosen subject. So we can see we have 3 pupils on a grade 2, 30 on a grade 3, and 9 on a grade 4. The grid is color-coded according to the outcome expectations, and so we have blue color for below expected, green for expected, and purple for above expected. So in that same row, 3.6 to 4.3, grade 3 is the expected grade because it shows in green, and we have a total of 3 below expected, 30 working at expected, and 9 working above the expected grade. You can see how quickly we can identify those who are working above, on, and below expectations here. Although the design of the matrices and terminology are similar, this is different to the tools in 4Matrix, which compare 2 series side by side, such as series comparison or subject summary, because in those tools, the comparison is made against a different data set. For example, current working at grades versus targets, and not based on prior attainment. Up until 2016, a school would have used transition matrices for reporting on 3 levels of progress measure for subjects, particularly English language and mathematics. It used the students' Key Stage 2 NC levels as a prior attainment and Key Stage 4 GCSE grades as the outcome. The performance measure had a notion of expected progress, in this case, 3 levels. It is important to mention that this legacy format of prior attainment and outcome grading used the same underlying points format known as QCA points. With the introduction of Key Stage 4 9-to-1 outcome grades in 2016, the 3 levels of progress measure was no longer reported on, and there is no direct replacement. It was superseded by the much more holistic measure, Progress 8, which looks at attainment across a range of subjects. In Year 6 of primary school, which represents the end of Key Stage 2, students take national curriculum tests in mathematics, English reading, and English grammar, punctuation, and spelling. Skills scores are now used to report outcomes of these tests for recent Key Stage 4 cohorts, instead of the previous national curriculum levels. Skills scores are the values we'd now expect schools to have imported into 4Matrix. As scale scores and 9-to-1 grades do not correspond to each other in terms of underlying points, the DfE have said it's not possible to find expected progress in a particular subject. However, schools can still use the 4Matrix Transition Matrices tool on the basis that they will need to set their own expected outcome criteria. Most likely, this will be calculated taking into account Key Stage 2 prior attainment to set expected Key Stage 4 outcome grades. So now let's take a look in 4Matrix. Let's take a look at the prior attainment data and how it is presented in 4Matrix via the admin edit mark book. Here we can see the scale scores for reading, GPS, and maths. Officially, there is no definitive way to use scale scores with progress measures. For 4Matrix users, any school who wishes to look at P8 measures in their analysis will need to have converted these scale scores into the old NC levels to get the legacy Key Stage 2 English and Maths fine points, for example, 4.9. This will change once our share and compare service is completed in the summer, and also when the DfE publish the national data at the end of October. A function has been developed in 4Matrix to convert scale scores to legacy NC levels, which is located in the Calculate menu. The columns Custom P8 Start Point and Custom Average Point Score have been populated as a result of the conversion. So how does all this relate to transition matrices? The good news is you can use any of these Key Stage 2 scores as your starting point in the customizable TMs, NC levels, scale scores, or custom P8 start point. Now let's look at the grading at Key Stage 4. This is much more straightforward. The final piece we need to be aware of before we begin creating our own transition models is what the outcomes grades are worth in terms of performance points. When setting up a transition model, the outcome grade and how pupils are plotted is determined by the points that the grades are worth, not the grade labels themselves. For 9-to-1 GCSEs, this is straightforward. The number grade is equal to the points value. So a grade 5 is worth 5 points, and a grade 4, 4 points, and so on. But what about non-GCSEs? In 4Matrix, subjects are linked to QAN codes, and the QAN code identifies the qualification syllabus, awarding body, level of award, and outcome grades. By selecting File, Export Current Series Report, this will generate a report. Here we can see the outcome grade and the points associated with it. So looking here at art and design, a grade 9 is worth 9 points, grade 8 is worth 8 points, and so on. Now let's take a look at a vocational subject. Here we have BTEC Enterprise. And we can see the highest grade is a D star 2, worth 8.5 points. A D2, distinction level 2, is worth 7 points, and M2 is worth 5.5 points. So some of you may wish to save or print this information for reference to help when creating your transition models. Now let's go to the Transition Matrices tool in 4Matrix. Firstly, as an example, I'm going to use the P8 start points as Key Stage 2 prior attainment and the 2019 Attainment 8 validated estimates as a guide for Key Stage 4 outcomes to set up a model. So in this spreadsheet here, column A and column B is the official data from the DFE 2019 validated estimates. Column A is showing me the P8 start point, and column B is giving me the Attainment 8 estimate. I've simply divided the Attainment 8 estimate by 10. I then rounded to the nearest grade. It is likely that you may want to do something different in your school, but this is just to demonstrate how the tool might work. The next step following the rounding is group together my ranges. So I can see here from 1.5 to 3.5, expected outcome of grade 2, and from 3.6 to 4.3, an expected grade of 3, and so on. It is now possible to use the base P8 start point column and rounded average estimate column to create a customizable transition matrix by adding the ranges. So let's go back to the transition matrix tool. The controls which dictate how the transition matrices will work are here on the top left. Below this, we have the subject selector. The TMs are shown in the middle section of the screen, with the pupils in the chosen subject listed below and the standard filter on the right. If I select View Edit Models, this brings up the models that already exist in the database, shown in the left panel, and the settings within the selected model are shown on the right. I'm going to click on Add to create a new model, and I've given it a name of 2019 A8 Estimate P8 Start Point. We can now select the new model from the list on the left-hand side to set the criteria. Firstly, change the baseline to P8 start point. We'll leave the outcome set to 9 to 1. Underneath these settings, we have sections for baseline range, expected, and excluded range. Starting with the baseline range for the first row, I will type a label of no prior attain. I want this model to show students with no Key Stage 2 data, and they all will be plotted in this row. In the next two columns in this section, lower and upper, to specify the minimum and maximum prior attainment points for the pupils to include in the row. Because this row is for those with no prior attainment, I will set them both to 0. The expected points column relates to the outcome at Key Stage 4, and again, we'll set this to 0. We'll ignore the find points column in this demo. In the excluded range, we want the whole row to appear as excluded from our model so that the pupils do not contribute to the calculations. We'll set up the upper value to 10 because we know that this cannot be achieved as an outcome. If this was left as 0, there would be no exclusion range, and so pupils in this row would still contribute. The next step is to add each row using the P8 start point ranges and the expected grade outcomes as shown in the spreadsheet. In row 2, we'll set a label value of 1.5 to 3.5 and set the lower and upper points to the same values. We'll We'll set the expected points of 2. Again, as we move to the next row, we can now type in the label 3.6, 4.3 with the corresponding ranges and expected points value of 3. Now, to save me going through the next few rows, I will load the version of the model that I created earlier. But I'm just going to click on the save button because that's what you'd normally do in the circumstances. So I'm going to import. So now you can see the model has been completed. The transition model can now be used to display a progress matrix for any subject or group in any selected series by comparing the P8 start point data for pupils with their subject attainment at Key Stage 4. The option panel is where users will select their Key Stage 2 start point setting and subject. The start point used for the TM model just created was P8 start point. So I'm selecting the 2019 Attainment 8 start point model I've just imported. I'm going to select the subject geography. The model will group the pupils into rows according to their P8 start point and plots them in the cell that corresponds to their outcome at Key Stage 4 for the selected subject in the options panel. The coloured cells will be coordinated according to the active transition model. Grey cells indicate that pupils are excluded from the expected model. In this case, the row labelled no prior attainment. There are 2 students who are studying geography that do not have any Key Stage 2 prior attainment, but I can see their outcome grades. Blue indicates that pupils are working below expected progress. Green indicates pupils are working up at expected progress. And purple indicates pupils are working above expected progress. The number and percentage of pupils in each banding below expected, expected, expected plus above, and above expected is shown to the table to the right of the matrices. There are 8 students, 9.52% below expected progress, followed by just over 57% reaching expected progress and 33% above. The results panel will initially show all pupils in the selected subject, but this can be filtered by selecting a cell in the matrices to see which pupils are included. The default columns include information on each pupil, base points, base row, outcome display, progress, and their expected grade. The progress column will either show excluded, below, expected, or above. By clicking on the 5 in the 4.4 to 4.8 row, the pupil results panel will filter to list those students. We can see the students have a base point that are between 4.4 and 4.8. And the expected progress of a grade 4. But their current grade attainment is a grade 3, so they are below expected. You can use TMs against any series in your database, including your current assessment data collection, or to review the student targets set by the school. By using the More Columns option, it is possible to add pupil premium, or UPN and other contextual data. It is possible to print and export data from the TM tool via the File menu. There are 2 print options. The first one being the Overview report, which prints the TM and the pupil results table. The second one is the Photo report. It groups the pupils together based on below expected, making expected progress, and finally above expected, showing for each pupil their photo, their prior attainment range, row, current grade and expected grade. By using the file option, you can export to Excel. This creates 3 worksheets: the description, giving details of the TM being used, series and subject name, the main table, main transition model itself, and finally, the results table. You can use the filter option. So if I go to advanced, I can now filter down to the boys only. And only the boys are now displayed in the transition model. So far, we've been looking at transition models using P8 start points. As mentioned earlier, the Year 11 cohort have Key Stage 2 scale scores outcomes. In fact, the Key Stage 4 cohort of 2020-21 were the first cohort with scale scores, but performance tables were cancelled due to the pandemic. Hence, there was no update to the Progress 8 calculation. It is possible to set up customizable TMs using Key Stage 2 scale scores as prior attainment. Remember, you can have as many transition models as required based on prior attainment and for particular subject areas. Like before, we will select View Edit Models to add a new model. I'm going to name it Key Stage 2 Scale Scores Prior Attainment Bands. And selecting the model. The DFE did publish Key Stage 4 statistics for 2021, which included the prior attainment bands based on the average of reading and maths, based on the criteria of below 100 was low prior attainment, 100 but less than 110 middle prior attainment, and finally 110 or above high prior attainment. The first row I'll create again will be for no prior attainment data. The next step is to add each row using the DFE's scale score ranges. In row 2, I'll set a label of less than 100. The lower points at 70 and the upper points at 99.99 and set the expected points to 3. It is important to note the school is in charge of setting the criteria for the expected points. In row 3, I will set the label of equal to 100 and less than 110. Lower points to 100 and the upper points to 109.99 with expected points value of 5. And finally, greater than 110, 110 to 120 with an expected points of 7. I'm setting my baseline points here to scale scores. So I'm going to save that model. To load the model up, on the left-hand side here, underneath the options, under the option setting, I will choose the start point scale scores. The option, underneath option now, will be offered combinations of Key Stage 2 subject scores that can be used. We will choose scale scores APS RM to match the DFE and finally select the model. Now looking at the pupils in the panel, the base points is now showing the average scale score of reading and maths set by the parameters in the options panel. The DFE also published transition matrices based on the 2021 results data. So you could use those ranges. Here's one I created earlier. We'll quickly look at working with vocational subjects in the TMs, which will have a different grading structure and points allocation to 9:1 GCSEs. Let's use the 2019 model I created earlier and select child development. For row 4.9 to 5.4, there is no green cell showing for expected progress. Let's take a look at the Attainment 8 estimate model for row 4.9 to 5.4. It has an expected point set to 5. But if you recall, when we looked at the child development grading, an M2 is worth 5.5 points. Hence, the 8 grades here are shown in purple, as 5.5 points is greater than 5, the expected points. Let's create a different transition model I created earlier, where the expected points fall in line with the points awarded for the grading structure. And as you can see now, the child development, I have got green boxes showing for expected for each of my rows. That brings me to the end of the webinar. If you have any further queries, please contact us on support via help.4matrix.com. Thank you.